All right. Good morning to the rainy day Sunday super late show. But Paulo has told me that has joined us this morning. Has told me about the custom over there of sleeping in on Sundays and lunch lasting all day, which I found perfect. So we're right on track. I don't care.
Yeah, it just feels for you. I'm in Europe. It's three. It's quarter past three right now, which and we're used to having late lunches. So at this time, I would probably still be if we have a family thing, we'll probably still be having lunch, and we would not stop until dinner time. Then we would
Nice.
not have dinner, but
Well, I'm just sitting here like I just need to come visit, on a Sunday apparently. So,
food's always food's always good.
all right, Palace. So we were talking. We were on the fossil show, and I don't know if you could tell I was in shock. So,
Hmm.
but we're doing the fossil show last Wednesday on Graphic Man's channel, right? And then Eric Breen has his turn to come on there and show it, and he bring to me at least in a whole different way. He just nonchalantly said, "Before I show my books, I'm just going to let everybody know that Keith Giffen has passed away." And I was just
Hmm.
like, "Holy crap!" Like it got me in the moment. I immediately jumped on Facebook during the show and was seeing how he did his what was going on. And did you happen to see what he did while he was in the hospital? Apparently, he was in the hospital. He
Yeah.
gets on Facebook and he puts it out there. I heard his family might have had something to do with it, but he said he's sitting in the hospital after a massive stroke a few hours before he dies, and he puts, "I told you I was sick. Anything to get out of New York Comic Con. Rest in peace, Keith Giffen. Birth date, death date. Blah ha ha ha."
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
passed away.
I always think it's a bit healthy to have a humor moment when somebody dear dies, and for this case, that was it. That was the perfect way to remember Keith Giffen, especially if you've never met him personally, but you're a fan.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah,
Well, we're
something
gonna. Yeah.
to remember him by.
Well, hey, I met him years ago, 2000. I want to say 16, 17, 18. I don't know, but I put the picture up on Instagram where I met him, and it was so wild because I wanted to be real careful. I was going through my boxes before Heroes Con. It's in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was a guest there. He hadn't been there in decades, from what I could tell. Right, so I started going through my boxes to find a few books to get him to sign, and I didn't realize how much of his stuff I've accumulated since I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, so when I met him, I walked right up to him, and it was so wild because I didn't want to come over like, "Oh, I know you through your work. I'm more familiar." I didn't want to be overly familiar. You know what I mean? Like, it'd
Hmm.
be weird. But as
Yeah.
soon as I saw him, I put my book bag down. And I went, "Giffen, you caused me a lot of trouble, man." Like that. And he just looked at me and he was like, like he'd heard this before. Like he was like, "Yeah." So we ended up talking, I don't know what it was, 20 or 30 minutes, which blew my mind. You know what I mean? Because I figured there'd be I just hit a sweet spot. And we talked comics, and I heard him mention music bands and all this stuff. And I got this convergence, this thing. Number one, he is a New Yorker, from what I've
Hmm.
met. Number two, he definitely he had punk rock roots. But the most amazing thing is he not only looked like one of his characters out of his comic books, he acted like one. You know what I mean? I was like, holy crap. There is a doctor, an alien doctor in Legion of Superheroes during the 80s that took care of Saturn Girl in Lightning Lad when she was
Hmm.
pregnant. And I'm like,
Yeah.
holy shit, that's Keith Giffen. I found him.
Well,
So, yeah.
that's a good way to put yourself in the comic. Eh? I mean, John Grant Morrison puts himself in the comic and it's himself. John Byrne puts himself in the comic and it's him. Giffen puts himself in the comic and it's the Doctor.
I'm wondering if it
That
was Paul Levett's though. I don't know, but I mean, but now but he gave me the secret. He told we had a big talk about the Justice League, right? And I think he really, really is or was good friends with James DeMantis. Not like we're great colleagues and we catch up, because when I started talking about that, his eyes lit up and he gave me the three issues of the whole Justice League 5-year run, all the
Mhm.
books they did that epitomized everything they were trying to do. It was Justice League Antarctica, which was an annual.
Mhm.
Okay. I brought up I want to know more about the Justice League Europe issue where all the everybody's in costume and they have to go to a classroom and learn French, and they're like chewing gum, and the teacher makes them put their gum on their nose in class and all this stuff, right? And then he told me the third one, and I've forgotten over the years, but I think it's Justice League #8, where they're moving into the embassy. He was really into the sitcom humor with that book. So I felt like I had like the secret. Like I've just been told something, that he never put in an interview or anything. So let's get full disclosure out of the way. We were talking about Giffen and stuff. Tell him what you told me about before we get into the books. I have a ton of books floating around here. While you were waiting on me to see you here, you saw me organizing. Tell them your experience with Giffen, what you know, and whatever you want to share.
Sure. I don't have Giffen's childhood endearment in the same way as I do with Perez and Byrne, because I was mainly a Marvel guy, even though the Marvel and DC publisher were the same over here.
Right.
The Brazilians sent their comics over here, and we would read them. And at the time that I was starting, it was Giffen's Legion. And by the time I got addicted to comics, it was Giffen and DeMatteis and Maguire in the Justice League International. And that's what we thought about it. It's Justice League International. We never had the term of endearment of the Bwahaha era. Justice League International was where it was at, especially because fans outside North America were very endeared on the aspect of having a team made up of heroes from other countries.
Right on. Yeah. Gotcha, man.
But because I was mostly Marvel guy, not a DC guy, and we never had the Gerber Giffen Defenders run, they skipped right over that. I was never a big Giffen fan. It was not until I started reading in English that I understood how Giffen was important, and especially needed to read the Legion stuff. As an artist, that was the most important to me. I do have Giffen stuff. It's more recent. It's post year 2000, and I think it shows how versatile he is.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I understand how important it is from a historical perspective. And how losing Giffen is a tremendous blow to American comics. So
yeah,
but it's a good idea if you're aware of his body of work and try to read the best things that he's done.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I got a ton of it here and stuff. And we got John C. Jared's out there. Brain cracked me up here. I'm glad I kept it together here, but. Yeah, John C's, you got to be like John C. Got to thumb it up, subscribe, and hit that bell. He is right here. But Breen knows Giffen. Hold up your cat and say, watch the live stream, and I won't shoot this cat. There's a National Lampoon cover from the 70s. Well, I've got the Legion stuff. I've got the cover over here. Giffen used that cover a few times. Lobo was holding up an alien, threatened to shoot it one time, and all this stuff. Yeah, the Justice League Europe used it. Nice. All right. So for me, Giffen wasn't really somebody I noticed until I was 10, right? And it wasn't that I was there for Giffen. It was because I was a Legion of Superheroes fan, right? But from the Stepdad's collection, I have his original comics and some upgrades I did, but I found him in Claw the first time. And a lot of people may not realize that he had a very Jim Starlin, George Perez-like style when he first started out. It was still kind of rubbery here and there. And Bob Layton inked him, but Claw the Unconquered was sort of like, it's obviously what it looks like. It's kind of a ripoff of Conan, but it's got a little bit of like Elric in here and just a little bit of sci-fi with the monsters and stuff, right? But it's still like, it's fantasy of the era, if you will, right? And this, if I can get some light here, this is how Giffen drew when he started out.
Yeah, when you look at Giffen's body of work, you'll notice he's adaptive when it comes to art style. You can't pin him down because he has that Kirby riff on the Defenders.
Well, it's there you go. That's going to segue right in there, right? So I pulled out some stuff. He was such a Kirby nut himself. I've got a little stack here we can hit on later where he apes Jack Kirby right out there and stuff. But he had his transitioning of his art. I'm trying to think what the word is. No, it's not sloppy, But basically, there was either, I'm trying to think where the person was from. It was either an Argentina artist or a French artist. I can't remember which one. I should have looked it up for the show. But as a consumer, as a kid who was buying his comics in the late 80s in the midst of his Justice League and stuff, he had some controversy because I think he got sued for plagiarism or something, but he started studying this artist's work. And that's where we started getting the really wild stuff where he really got out there and got more and more. I didn't grab his Trencher stuff, but he really got more and more to where it was simplistic drawings. It was about space, a real minimalist approach and stuff. And apparently he said he never copied a page, but he studied this guy so much that he was basically drawn like him. And supposedly it ruined his reputation. I never heard about it until years later. And it turns out some journalist with a comic book magazine or something did a hit piece on him, and he kind of admitted it. Even though this guy's got a huge body of work and was like the go-to guy and everything he touched was gold. I think they confused Ambush Bug being real popular in the early 80s and then dropping and Lobo becoming big. I think that's what they were saying. I don't know, man. But I really found him like a little bit in the Defenders. This was the Stepdads. And this is the Defenders run he did in the late 70s where he ate Jack Kirby a lot. It had Moon Knight in it. People rediscovered it. So that's a Jack Kirby cover. And then we get in here, and this is Klaus Janson came in and inked this stuff if it's going to show up. But it's very Kirby-esque. The further, I think he was on the book about a year. And the longer he was on the book, the more Kirby-esque it got. And he was just a young guy. This is 1977. And he was born in 53, so he's 24. And he's popped up on a teen book of all things that quick. Now, in the 70s, I was telling you, he sort of like, he was doing some stuff at DC and he was doing stuff for Marvel. And then people kind of wondered what happened there. And he admits that he was like, I did everything wrong. He did everything wrong. Nobody would hire him. He's unreliable. He was late. He had attitude and stuff. He gets married a couple years later in the early 80s. And the girl he's married to, now I'm assuming they stayed together, had no idea that he'd ever worked in comics. So she tells him, he's telling her the stories. And she's like, what? So whatever he's doing, I think they're living in Jersey or something. He goes to work or something. He comes back and he walks in and his wife's just doing some wifely thing and stuff and went, blah, blah, blah. How was your day? And then went, oh, by the way, you have a meeting with such and such. I don't know if it was Paul Levitz or Dick Giordano, but she somehow, while he was at work in one day, not knowing anything about comics, not even real sure where he worked, tracked down people he used to know. And they said, you have a meeting in the morning. So he goes to, I guess, DC offices. And when he walks in, there's no lecture. There's no nothing. Whatever his wife told the people in the office, they were acting like it was day one. It was like a George Costanza. It's like he just showed up for work like he never was fired or quit or anything. And they just went on. And that's when he really honed his craft and started taking it serious to where he was able to do pencil layouts for like 5 or 6 books at a time if he needed to. He got real quick and just his imagination. So it just shows you what happened when you get a good woman behind you, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Oh, what we got here? Jared knows about it. He swiped entire pages from Manoj. The Comics Journal was not happy about it. There we go.
Yeah, Jose Munoz is most famous for his work on Alex Sinner.
There we go.
That's probably what he was swiping because it would be the easiest to get. A lot of the Argentinian stuff got published in Europe, in Italy. There was a couple of Italian publishing houses who were connected to Argentina, mostly because Corto Maltese creator Hugo Pratt worked in Argentina for a while, and he was the one who brought over all the stuff that was written by Solano Lopez, and he brought in Juan Jimenez and Ricardo Barrero. And Jose Munoz stuff, Alex Sinner, is available in a multitude of formats in many European countries. So I imagine that's the stuff that's easiest to get in the USA.
What I'm guessing from a consumer standpoint, because like I said, I didn't hear about this till the 90s. And it was probably 1993 or 94, because I remember the comic book shop that was open when this happened. But I think when it came to like people who collected comics and all that stuff, I think we were indifferent about it because he had such a large body of work behind him already that you were like, okay, the guy probably just messed up. You know what I mean? Like, and it just moved
Yeah.
on. You know, it wasn't so much looking at Giffen through blind eyes or anything, you know, through rose colored glasses or giving him a pass. He just had so much work. It was like, you know, okay, he messed up one time, whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So, yeah, and this was like years after it already hit. And then later on, I sort of heard how like his reputation was hurt and stuff like that. None of us ever heard anything about it. Nothing. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
we're in the midst of the 90s. He's doing Trencher. It was Trencher. Whenever Trencher came out is when we were talking about it and people were throwing out these little facts about old Giffen and stuff. So when he did Trencher and Image, that's when it popped up. Okay. So when I found him, it's because I was collecting. We had the Legion of Superheroes, the Great Darkness saga. I didn't
Mm.
dig up through the boxes too much, right? So I'd heard about this, right? But on the newsstand, I didn't really grab new. I was getting adventure reprints, Adventure Comics reprints, digest. Already had some older stuff of the Legion. But I was at a funeral when I was 10 years old. My grandpa died. I left the funeral home. Jay walked across the road, and it was one of the last malt shops that you could find. You know what I mean? All right. And I walked in there, and the lady apparently saw me, and she had a milkshake waiting for me. And I looked over, and there was comic books, right? And I still had the comics and stuff, right? So I really ended up knowing who Giffen was through this Legion of Superheroes 300, where this thing is an event, and it's about Firo Lad's brother hooked up to a machine, and there was different stories throughout where he was seeing multiverses, you know, seeing other versions of the Legion and where they were and things that happened to him. And then he finds a universe where his brother is still alive, or he's able to take his brother's place, and he went to that universe. And I was like, oh my God, this was freaking good. And then, of course, in the back page, it's got this 2-page spread, and it's got all the Legion of Superheroes standing there. And if you look in the background of the people looking at the Legion, they've hidden Spider-Man and Batman in the crowd. You know, so right away,
Yeah.
I was sort of like, well, that's funny. They've added some humor here to it, right? So immediately I started getting this book, and this is the original and the upgrade. So I'm buying this with my money, and we have this fantastic issue 301 where Keith Giffen and Paul Levitz co-plot the story where Chameleon Boy is going back to his post-apocalyptic world
Hmm.
to get his superpowers back, you know, and has to fight all this stuff. And his art actually blew me away in this one, if it's going to show
Mm.
up. Now, this
Right.
is his art. So basically, we have a father and son story here.
Hmm.
And then this was followed up.
Because that's one of the thing. By the when I bought the Great Darkness Saga hardcover, and and there had been a Great Darkness Saga TPB that was very old, but it was like only the last 5 issues, and the hardcover has everything. So you're kind of following along the story for everyone involved and everyone who's not on the team at the time. So following the Chameleon Boy and RJ Brandy on Durla. The, I've read that. RJ Brandy was later revealed to be the father of Legion founder Chameleon Boy.
Yeah,
Okay, but reading that story, that's when you really feel it, and more than trying to help out the kids who started all that, you finally understand why RJ Brandy is important to the Legion, because it's just for him, for Chameleon Boy, who had never met his father before. In fact, had no concept of what it was, because if there's one thing that Chameleon Boy inherited from his father, was the notion: I don't want to be here on Durla with all the other freaks. I want to get out of here and know the rest of the universe.
right.
And both of them having lost their powers, Brandy can't get them back, but Rip Daggle can, and all of the help that he's giving him just for him, Chameleon Boy, that's it makes our Brandy a figurehead in the Legion in a way that's never been felt before.
Absolutely. He brought a humanistic approach. So when I discovered Giffen and Levetts and all stuff going with what you're saying, I'll show these books real quick here, but they showed a whole bunch of stories that had to do with family. Lightning Lad versus his brother Lightning Lord all of a sudden, right? Bring up
Yeah.
family issues. And then we had, yeah.
And
And then,
during my jumps through DC stories, because I wasn't buying them regularly, I remember the story where Colossal Boy introduces his new wife to his parents because his mother is the president of Earth.
Oh, yes, and she ended up, yeah, and yeah, she was posing as she was a Durlan's posing as Shrinking Violet for everybody that doesn't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, um, but and then at the same time, they did the story where they brought in a new Invisible Kid because his sister was brought to Brainiac 5, and
Mhm.
Computo took her over because she was really sick and dying. So it's another thing about family and stuff, right? This was blowing my mind. But it was this issue, and I'm trying not to show the upgrades and the original ones and stuff.
Mhm.
This issue, just a day in the life of Legion, they brought in Emerald Empress, and they just get tortured. They're all captured. They're tortured by her. Sunboy runs his mouth to her. Emerald Empress crushes his jaw, and it all in one issue. Man, it was like, oh God, this is serious. All of a sudden, it was like, all this sweet stuff and family bonding and people getting closure. Then all of a sudden, you're like, you never saw a hero just sit there and run their mouth. And she pulled a Doctor Doom, in my opinion. As a kid, I was like, I could see Doctor Doom crushing somebody's jaw in their hand for running their mouth
Mhm.
and stuff, right? So he
Yeah.
was able to inject some stuff, right?
Yeah,
But
when you become familiarized with the Fatal Five, and throughout the all the times when they show up, I mean, they try to show that Tharok is the leader of and he's the guy who's actually bad, and but no, the Emerald Empress is completely wacko.
yep,
You do not want to cross her. You should always be afraid of her. Every time shows up, and they give her a line. Oh man, this chick's crazy.
yeah.
She she will kill you.
It was perfect to start as a kid to read that run where you had like an action adventure, post-apocalyptic father and son, and then like brothers,
Mm,
talking and stuff, and then all of a sudden you get hit with that. Like the rhythm of reading that monthly was perfect. This is for Breen. This is bouncing off what you said because you reminded me of it, right? So this is Legion 89. Giffen did the first 12 issues and all
mhm,
this stuff, and this is one of those covers that Breen was talking about. Buy this book or I'll shoot him. But this is a Durlan in 1989 in DC Universe. He ends up switching places. I got two of them. He ends up
mhm,
switching places in time due to something going on in the Legion of Superheroes, where he is actually RJ Brand in the future. RJ
mhm,
Brand is from the 20th century that
mhm.
forms the Legion, and this is Keith Giffen keeping ties to his Legion roots. To me, Giffen's always going to have this soft spot or have something with the Legion. I think that is the book that he's going to be tied to the most, even though he's got his Omega Man creation here, Lobo, and all
Mhm.
this stuff like that. He's going to be most famous for Lobo, but I think with comic book people, it's going to be Legion that he
Mhm.
always goes back to.
Sure. At the at the time, so Legion was showing up in an anthology over here in an anthology, sharing space with Checkmate and the Suicide Squad. He had taken over the spot from Animal Man.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, so I didn't read many stories back then. I prefer the Checkmate and Suicide Squad at the time, especially because there was a crossover. But yeah, the Legion was not a superhero title.
No.
None of those guys were out there trying to do good, and I suppose that's what made the title good. I
You're
don't
talking
think
about
it.
this one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, they were conniving. Burl Docs, these guys, at the beginning they were in prison with the Dominators and stuff, and some of them
Yeah.
were in prison for a reason. And the first thing they did is, Burl Docs went and kind of destroyed a planet. It's a
Mhm.
computer system. I'm not going to get into it. Yeah, they did some stuff, conniving creatures and stuff. And there's a book in there might talk about if we get time where
Mhm.
Giffen returned to the book.
Yeah,
So the next
it's
thing,
it's inevitable that Vril Dox is the way he is because I don't want to be evil like my father, but you can't help it.
yeah. Oh my God, it's so cool. I'm trying to think. I'll think who the character is and stuff. But he actually answered a lot of questions if you were a Legion of Superheroes fan about some of the villains and stuff. There's a few things that they cleaned up in that book. And that's just Keith Giffen. That's how I know he has to have this love of the Legion of Superheroes to have these things. But with that love of the superheroes, this may have been when like I just really started taking Giffen super serious. And I didn't bring up the Baxter series, but in '85, during the Crisis on Infinite Earths and all this stuff like that. Some of these books in '85 might have came to me while I was in the hospital getting my appendix took out, right? But they had the Baxter series of the Legion of Superheroes started out with the #1, and if you had to wait a whole year for them to come out on newsstand as reprints with a new cover, and we got the Legion of Superheroes versus the Legion of Supervillains, and Keith Giffen absolutely hated Karate Kid, thus he must die. So my thing with Giffen was everything I had read. There's a little bit of humor here and there, but there were stakes. Like he would be absolutely cruel. This is when death was real, and death had a meaning and stuff like that. And I'm just sitting here reading this stuff, and everybody's talking about X-Men, and everybody's talking about Teen Titans.
Oh man, John Byrne totally stole that cover. Now I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they didn't use when they did Legion stories, they didn't do Legion covers. And at the time when they hit the crisis, they stopped publishing Legion, so we never got the reboot.
There we go.
So, and what you just said about him wanting to kill Karate Kid, that explains something.
Yeah.
Because Shooter apparently didn't like Giffen. When Shooter said that there are two people we want to steal from DC, they're George Perez and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, but not Giffen. And him wanting to kill the character that Shooter created when he was 14 years old.
I've never put that together because I didn't know to believe the thing about Shooter or not, because I got stuff where Keith Giffen came in and worked on Starbrand with Shooter. So I'll show it to you in a minute or something here. Yeah. But I want to talk about what Giffen did. This is when I started realizing, after reading the Silver Age and the Mike Grell stuff and everything, Keith Giffen's designs, as I reread this stuff, he really made the future look like the future. He started doing the architecture, the technology, and I hate to use this word, but he started putting in a diversity of aliens in the background that ended up having their own fans. There's these little brown aliens that walk around, and they don't have a head. They have a long neck with an eyeball on the top.
Yeah.
And, people started noticing stuff he was putting in the background. So was really like a punk rock and rock and roll with the Legion.
Yeah, but you compare it to 50s Legion, and why are all these guys? Is this the future? And you all go to alien planets, and everyone's a human? Why?
Yeah. And I love the Legion. I've had talks where I've explained to people what I thought while they acted so Silver Age, and I'm thinking, well, that's a whole other talk and stuff, right? But like I said, I started noticing, like, it was Giffen's work I was noticing, if that makes any sense. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm realizing, to me, it's starting to look like it was George Perez, John Byrne, me getting over being terrified of Jack Kirby's work as a kid and seeing, becoming a Kirby nut. And then, like, I was a Legion nut, but, like, I'm seeing now that it was like Giffen. I'm like, I knew I was a Giffen fan, but I think I took him. He put out so much work and everything like that over the years. You just kind of got used to him being there, like a song on the radio. You know what I mean? That DJ's going to be on the radio forever, it feels like. So good stuff there. We can skip ahead and talk about his Kirby stuff if you want.
And actually, something just came to mind because I was trying to him having aliens with eyeballs on his talk. And then, man, that was an influence on Ron Lim. Ron Lim did crowd scenes on the Silver Surfer, and the aliens all looked stupid, completely ridiculous. It made absolutely no sense. And then that reminds me of what Alan Davis used to do on character designs. But Alan Davis surely did not copy Keith Giffen. It might have been the other way around, because by the time Alan Davis showed up in the US, he was already well established at 2000 AD. You had the characters introduced into Captain Britain, and before that, stuff that appeared in 2000 AD with Alan Moore. Surely Keith Giffen was familiar with that work.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, because over the years, after finding out, that's the thing about the controversy that got popped up. When they're talking about was it a European artist? Was a guy from Europe or?
No, Jose Munoz was from Argentina. The Italians imported him, so that would put if Alex Sinner was the stuff that was most famous, that's when the French would take over publishing, and that would be how we got into the U.S.
Well, my thing is that I started realizing he was studying art. This guy probably was a fan of comics, number one, obviously Jack Kirby. And that just sort of relayed to me in my mind that the guy just studied art. I mean, the guy really was an artist in his own way. If you look at how he went from that style where, it's Jim Starlin like or whatever was going on, then he just got sort of more about space and line and shadow. I can't believe I can't think of the word that I'm looking for. It's a minimalist approach. And then by the time you get to Trencher, I wish I'd pulled out some Trencher. Trencher looks like one of those paintings you get paint by numbers where it's a bunch of squiggles and lines. And if you didn't have the number, you would have no idea where to color it. So the guy was experimenting and blossoming or whatever in his own little thing, just getting more and more out there with his artwork. Then he could turn around and he could ape Jack Kirby brilliantly, right? This Legion of Substitute Superheroes, when DC 52 started and things were pretty bland and stuff, all of a sudden here comes Giffen, and he does a Jack Kirby-esque Emerald Interest story with the Legion of Superheroes, and you're just sort of like, why is this not winning any awards? I mean, there was no competition at the time, and if people read this, they would not. The last thing they would think is that DC 52 era. This is 2011. They had just took down his Doom Patrol book because of DC 52, and he comes in and does this. I mean, this stuff is fantastic.
Can you imagine that it's the early 70s, the Fourth World fails, and instead of asking Kirby to come up with a plan of the Apes thing, it's just instead they would ask him, "Hey Kirby, do you want to write and draw the Legion?" And they wouldn't hire Dave Cockrum, they would hire Kirby. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It would have been an interesting alternate universe.
Oh man. I'm just saying I'm trailing off here, man. That would be okay. That'd be awesome, man. But speaking of Marvel and stuff like that, in the middle of I got this for $3. I have all 8 issues. I need to get that price tag off of here. But during the DC 52, Keith Giffen and Dan Didio did something different, right? Everybody's, you remember the 52, a lot of that stuff was minimalistic and I don't know. Anyway, but you didn't get a lot of bang for your buck in the books. It was, I can't believe I'm forgetting the term for the storytelling because I've said it for 12 years. But anyway, you got nothing really happened in the books and the pacing was super slow. And then all of a sudden they sneak up and they write this book that secretly is a Silver Age Marvel book by Kirby. You know what I mean? Omactivate. And he's just kicking so much ass and busting heads and all the stuff. And he's it's like his magic word. He says Omactivate, and he's like some geeky little kid that turns into this, This was like a fun book, and I could not believe, we get like big time Jack Kirby inspired villains and stuff in here. And it even had like little cliffhangers that made you wonder about, is it supposed to be Bruce Banner turning into OMAC, or is it Peter Parker? But yeah, that's what I mean.
Banner.
It's the way that's how these happen. There's little tidbits and stuff, right? And I remember being on some message board, and I was on YouTube at this time, but I was on some message board, and I talked about how this was secretly a Silver Age book, and it had to be Facebook. And Dan Didio gave me like some kind of like wink emoji or something if it was really him. They wouldn't acknowledge it, but they were like giving me the like, yeah, you get it, like what they were doing. Yeah. So I couldn't believe this book died after 8 issues because,
the thing, they launched the new 52 and what is it? We're launching 52 new number ones. That is too much from a market point of view.
Yeah,
I ended up buying the wrong books, I suppose, because I bought Demon Knights and it was interesting, but it was made around the demon, but it had no Kirby there. And then I bought the Justice League International, which was written by Dan Jurgens, but it had no Giffen there. And ended up not buying OMAC.
So, oh man, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It was just the glut of stuff out there, and there weren't a lot of people. I mean, everybody wanted their Batman and things like that, and just it wasn't real cohesive.
Well, I wanted the stuff that I was hoping that they would incorporate the stuff that made some of those titles good that I liked about them. Because I also bought Stormwatch, and that was the most boring Stormwatch slash Authority that I've ever read.
and that was the one. Jim Starlin ended up taking that over, I think.
Yeah,
so it still didn't help.
After a while, it didn't. But yeah, so they did Giffen doing the wrong comic, or the right comic. I just didn't think that I would want to read OMAC, and I chose like 3 or 4 titles. I also bought Resurrection Man at the time, and it is then Abnett, who with Keith Giffen was responsible for revitalizing the cosmic section of the Marvel universe.
All right. I tell you what, let me show these 2 books and we'll jump in on that. And because we already talked about bringing that up, man, I love how this is just flowing. This is awesome, man. So let me pop off some things you said here, right? So let me see if this is written by Jim Shooter yet. No, this is Carrie Bates. Apparently Shooter already left, right? So I get it now. So this makes a lot of sense because a lot of people use the new universe, John Byrne and some people, I found out years later, as a way to take some shots at Jim Shooter after he was fired, right?
Yeah.
So because basically Starbrand was in Pittsburgh, his hometown, you got the idea that Ken O'Connell was Jim Shooter, right? So they blow up Pittsburgh, right? And now you're sitting here telling me that he didn't want Giffen because he killed Karate Kid and stuff. So this explains why Keith Giffen all of a sudden got thrown on 1 issue of Starbrand to draw it. And what happens is that Ken Connell is having horrible dreams. We have the Keith Giffen art that I'm talking about, where he just got more and more minimalistic and a few other things here. And he goes to a clinic because he's having bad dreams and he can't sleep. And it turns out that a kid had died in the real world, while he was on his watch. And they find out that he's dreaming this comic book world, and this comic book world is drawn like Jack Kirby. He's an actual superhero in this world. Night Mask is bringing him in. And this was the first time that I can recall Keith Giffen aping Jack Kirby perfectly. And it looks like Vince Collada was inking him is what it looks like. Let me see who's inking it. It was Bob Wiacek inking this.
Then it's good.
Yeah, and the kid that died is his sidekick and stuff, right? But I swear,
it's also a pot shot that they're using Carrie Bates as a writer because Bates never had much of a Marvel output.
Yeah, there we go. But there's Starbrand in the Jack Kirby dream world looking like Orion meets an Eternal.
Yeah.
All right. So I love this book. Starbrand's one of my favorite series. Like I had them all, even after Byrne got on there. But this book, this is the one that like stayed out for months because I would like just get in there and be like, he's doing Jack Kirby and stuff, right? So that makes a lot of sense. And then, I pulled this out for some reason. But Keith Giffen, I really wished I'd asked him how he ended up. He ended up doing 2 or 3 issues of Justice, this random issue of Night Mask, and this. And this is in 1986. This is right before he started really popping on Justice League. So I really wished I'd asked him how did that come about because I didn't have the timeline in my head when I met him. So that kind of shows you he goes, every.
Yeah, but I think Carrie Bates is having a bit of a pot shot. Although Shooter mentioned that how Mort Weisinger always kept comparing him to Carrie Bates. This Carrie Bates kid is better than you. You'll never amount to anything as long as he's around. And then Shooter once tells the story of how he finally met Carrie Bates in person. And Weisinger was always telling me, this 14-year-old kid is running circles around you, right? Weisinger was not a nice man, and he made his 2 writers trying to outdo each other. Man. But I don't think they had a problem. I see him having a problem with Giffen, even though they ultimately ended up working together because I think Giffen was also at early Valiant.
Yeah. I don't know if it was Valiant. He did a book called Punks after Shooter left. He did a 3-issue series called Punks, I think, at Valiant. But that does not mean he didn't do something before that. I'm just not recalling it. Punks was, I keep bringing up that Valiant stuff. Punks was something I never really understood. I got the first issue, and it's the first cover of the first issue is like a street with a city skyline, and it's a bunch of graffiti on a wall. So I was like, I went through trying to read it, and I couldn't do it. But he also did a lot of stuff. He did a few things at Topps Comics, a book called Victory that only lasted 1 issue. And it had Silver Star and a bunch of Pacific Comics and Kirby stuff.
Yeah, they tried to launch a universe around Kirby's concepts. Kirby was not involved directly. Ditko drew a few stories as well.
Yeah,
but the thing is the trying to build a universe around Kirby concepts in the 1990s when there was a glut of superhero universes. Topps was not a regular publisher. They were a gum producer.
Okay. I have some of their card sets and stuff. I remember Jim Salicrup being brought in to like get that thing going. And in hindsight, a lot of those books are actually pretty good. It blew my, in hindsight, just too much stuff coming out in the 90s. All right. So now, I'll tell you what, pal, I want to. Was there something we're skipping? We're going to your annihilation. Let's talk about your annihilation stuff.
Yeah.
My head. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's when I finally started reading some Giffen on a regular basis, because before Annihilation there was a Thanos ongoing series. There are two trades because it only lasts 12 issues. The first one is Starlin being Starlin, retreading old ground. Thanos, Galactus, and then the second arc, Thanos gets stuck on a prison planet, and who is there? Star-Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Giffen reintroduces Star-Lord. Actually, he makes Star-Lord enters the Marvel universe in that story, because Star-Lord was never a Marvel universe character. There were a couple of cameos from characters from the Claremont and Burns Star-Lord story, the Star-Lord story. But that was it. Star-Lord is now in the Marvel universe, interacting with Marvel characters.
And I love the mask they put on him. It was like
Yeah.
sci-fi Sandman when I saw that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been in the movie. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because in the beginning he doesn't sound like Star-Lord at all, and he's been here in prison, and he doesn't have the ship anymore, and he's got all these technological bits stuck inside his head, and he's angry. Okay, I get it. But I guess it would probably end up explaining the thing I found aesthetically pleasing was that it was finally on Star-Lord, because there was Star-Lord shows up in Marvel Preview number 4, and on Marvel Preview number 4 and 7 there are the first two Sword in the Star installments, which were the backup stories in Marvel Preview, and those were by Bill Mantlo, and Keith Giffen draws the second story, which introduces Rocket Raccoon. And then the story was supposed to continue in a Star-Lord magazine, which was never published because Steve Englehart got mad at somebody and defected to DC. Yeah. So 25 years later, finally, Keith Giffen comes around to do something related to Star-Lord.
And also, you said that, I can't believe I forgot this, but Keith Giffen co-created Rocket Raccoon.
People forget, because it's not in the Marvel universe. It's not supposed to be. There was a time when Marvel published stories which were not set in the Marvel universe, and they were not meant to be referenced by Squirrel Girl or whatever.
Yeah.
But especially because that Rocket Raccoon, as he appears in that story, has nothing to do with. Bill Mantlo brings him in that Hulk story. But at the time, it was supposed to be something different. And I suppose Giffen would have continued being the regular penciler on the feature as the Star-Lord magazine went on. Because in that story, he doesn't draw like Kirby in the Defenders, and he doesn't draw like in the Legion, and he doesn't draw like in Ambush Bug. It's something that's appropriate for the black and white magazines.
See, it kills me because I mentioned before, when you told me you read that stuff, I was really excited because I missed that whole era. I was going through a divorce at the time, right? And as you're talking, I'm kind of remembering, I think I had a little bit of some kind of hardback trade, but I got rid of it because it wasn't the Giffen stuff. I think there was like an Annihilation 2, and I think it was DNA, Abnett and Danning or something.
Yeah.
But
because it did one of the there was a group of mini series that told the story from different points of view, and then it coalesced into the final Annihilation miniseries, which is the one from which they restart Guardians of the Galaxy and Nova. And
it seems like somewhere along the line, I remember a splash page as a big reveal, and I think it was like Ultron, but he had like insects. It's like he had a bunch of eyes, or maybe it was Annihilus. I don't know. But before I get off there, but my whole thing is when the Guardians of the Galaxy movies came out, the first one, so help me, I even though I had not read the Annihilation books, maybe I flipped through one or two or something. I don't know. But I'm not knowledgeable at it at all, like I told you. But for some reason, I was like, the James Gunn, is he putting that Giffen humor in this? when I saw it, knowing that Giffen did Annihilation, and that's where a bunch of these characters are coming from, that era of the cosmic universe and stuff, I was sitting there, wondering, is this? I mean, I think there's a video where I might have talked about it when people were doubting that Guardians of the Galaxy movie was going to be a hit because they didn't know the characters, and I'm in the video yelling, "It's a raccoon with a machine gun. What more do you want?"
Well,
You know what I
that's
mean?
that's how I described it to normies. This movie's going to be a hit because there's a talking tree and his sidekick, the talking raccoon with a big machine gun. It is even if it was Star-Lord doing jokes about the 80s. That's what I told people was going to make it a hit. The talking tree and the raccoon with the machine gun.
Yeah, we knew, yeah.
Because that's what the kids like. I mean, the adults can go watch the movie and, oh yeah, Star-Lord's telling jokes and I remember the 80s. But the kids all wanted the tree and the raccoon.
Wow. So we're going to jump back now a little bit, and I want to make sure we get everything we talking. Maybe we can go freestyle there at the end of this and stuff, right? So I told the humor stuff when it comes to him a little bit. So I've mentioned before, a lot of the humor stuff by Giffen I discovered in 7th grade when I had my appendix took out. There's a whole story behind that. And I ended up being in the hospital a little bit longer than what normally would happen because of some stuff. So people I didn't even know that knew my grandmother and stuff were bringing me comic books, right? And this is when they were on the spinner racks, and the spinner racks were fat and stuff because they would keep books forever and stuff. And I started getting this stuff, right? Keith Giffen with the Ambush Bug and Action Comics and stuff, right? Where's some more of it? This stuff, right? I'm like, what is this? What is this? It's where it was an Action Comics that was messing me up, right? The last time I had read Action Comics at this point, Superman books had a month where they were talking about pretend nuclear annihilation because it was 1984. You know what I mean? Like, there's Superman on the cover, like, oh God, they blew it all up and stuff. And then all of a sudden, a 360, and I get this stuff. I'm like, what is this? So I'm stuck in this hospital reading this stuff. And then this killed me, man, because you might, I think I told you about this one, but Keith Giffen, this is another thing where I knew he was reading European comic books and stuff.
Yeah.
I've got 2-3 copies of this because
that's Asterix.
Asterix and Obelix. He has and this is where he started having. This is the year that I started noticing like this form of art, and plus the European influence in there. I bragged about this book, I think, while we were on Fossils one night or somewhere like that, and then I went and reread it, and I'm like, nah, it's not that good. Not going to recommend it unless you're a real big fan of those guys and stuff, right?
Yeah. So those would have been published when I was a kid, but they weren't.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: the guys who convinced that publisher in Brazil to go from Disney to have superheroes alongside their Disney output, because they had the rights to Disney, they pretty much had permission to do whatever they wanted. The only thing that the publisher wanted was no continuing stories, which was impossible. But they ended up convincing the guys with the money. Okay, we'll have continuing stories, and they have to keep coming back every month. But one thing they wanted was for the comics to be intelligent. They wanted people to think of superheroes as intelligent. They would never have gone with the humor feature in the superhero comics. It didn't fit. Ambush Bug stories, when you have a Superman comic, a Batman comic, then the other comic is headlined by Tari Force, and then the other one is headlined by Green Lantern. There's no way you're gonna publish that. They avoided Howard the Duck as well. I always had I never asked the guy who was the co-editor and translator. I've met him a couple of times because his daughter lives here in Portugal, and he came to our monthly comics dinner. But I didn't ask him that if he hated Steve Gerber.
Oh, no.
Because he didn't publish Howard, he didn't publish Man Thing, and you went over the Defenders, which where I would have been able to see Keith Giffen artwork because it was mostly a Marvel guy.
Yeah.
So I should next time I'm able to meet him, if I have the chance, I'll ask him if he hates Steve Gerber.
I
Uh,
need the answer to that. Yeah, I mean, oh man, I've never
eh,
I've met people who just didn't get into his writing, but I've never met anybody who hated him. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
that damn Steve Gerber stuff.
Well, he wouldn't hate it. He just think, oh, this is not appropriate. And why is Steve Gerber not appropriate when Steve Gerber is Steve Gerber?
Man, I'm telling you, man. I'm like, I'm not. I mean, I'm not gonna get off track here too much, but like Steve Gerber, and I know I'm looking at this from somebody who's, I read a very few of his things and didn't understand it when I was a kid, but he's got that Iron Man annual that I show off. I don't know if it's number 3 or whatever. It brings back the Molecule Man and stuff, right? Now I know Howard the Duck, the Turnip Man, number issue 2 or 3. I remember the Steve Gerber stories that I knew it was Steve Gerber reading those for the first time as a kid. And then as I got older and discovered Gardner Fox for real, and then Alan Moore and stuff, I'm like, Steve Gerber should have been the Alan Moore of the 70s, if that makes any sense, with everything he did, especially that Omega the Unknown. Omega the Unknown, to me, is the first real Vertigo book. It should have been a Vertigo book in the 90s.
I get it.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But yeah, we need to do a show on Gerber, pal. I'm just letting you know. I mean,
well, that's the thing. If I'm not a big fan of Giffen because of my choice to read mostly Marvel when I was a little kid, Gerber completely goes over my head. I don't have that much interest in it. I thought, even when I was looking over the essential Howard the Duck, I should take this home. Maybe later.
Oh no, there's by no means do I like read everything Gerber and be like, oh, that was great. There's some shit I got 3 or 4 pages in and went, oh no, so, but like when he nails it to me.
The other thing is that Gerber was the guy doing intelligent humor in a market that had little intelligent humor.
Yeah,
I've already explained to people, Mad Magazine in Europe doesn't cut it. It's too dead too much dead jokes, and they're not spicy. It's not spicy enough. So Gerber being an environment where the other people are not bitingly funny, he stands out. In Europe, we have too many people like that. You had that Asterix cover. Well, Asterix is, what if you can read Gerber every day? One of the things that people don't understand about Asterix, especially because you don't have in America, you don't have the context. That thing had biting satire on the French political scene.
Yeah.
And even in Portugal, we don't know that. What we have is there are jokes that appeal in the same manner because ultimately we're all Romans. The Gallians were Celts conquered by the Roman Empire. The Lusitanians were Celts conquered by the Roman Empire.
See, I get all that. I mean, it's because of reading that work. It's kind of like I've learned feudal Japan from Usagi, and now I've learned Romans and stuff. I don't know, pal. I may have to figure out a way to get this to you. This is Action Comics 379. If you can't find a place to read it online, I would really like to know what your take is if you get a chance to read it. But it's interesting. I got it because I love the cartoons, and I've got 3 trades.
Jared's mentioning Guardians of the Galaxy.
When I clicked on it while you were talking.
Okay, so I finally, when they published the classic Guardians trades, I bought the 2 of them. One of them is the Gerber stuff. The other is essentially it's the Korvac saga. The thing is, I wanted to read the Guardians not because I was enamored with Gerber, but because I liked the Korvac saga.
Yeah.
And those costumes I thought that Paris drawing those costumes looked amazing.
Yeah.
That cover when they're on the Avengers, it's one of my favorite covers from my childhood.
Yeah. When it comes to Perez, I get excited when he draws Kirby characters realistically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've seen him do OMAC and DC Comics Presents in 82 or 83 or something. Blew my mind as a kid. We do a comment here. I didn't realize we had a few. Is this half a comment?
Yeah, that was a short while ago.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, right. Because the first Justice League Classified arc was with characters that introduced in his JLA run, and the second one was I can't believe it's not the Justice League.
I actually got rid of those. I gave those to my brother. I did not
Uh,
enjoy those, and that was the original team. It was just too much by that point.
no, that one's good. It scratches an itch if you remember the Bwahaha era. Their second arc had as a problem because it ends with we can't tell if it's a joke or not, but it ends with Sue Dibney. With Ralph and Sue have a running gag throughout the entire arc that Sue is pregnant. Ralph thinks Sue is pregnant, and she always keeps denying it. But that came out after the Sue was killed.
Okay,
So it's kind of dark.
So since we've come up with that, right, I was there from Legends to this number one. I've got 3 or 4 of these. Kevin McGuire, Keith Giffen might have signed this, right? And this was things I mentioned how I felt like Keith Giffen was into punk at some point, and those punk roots stuck with him. And my interpretation, I don't know, right? But you got to remember when this came out. Bless you. But when this came out, you had Watchmen and you had Dark Knight Returns finally like taking off. Like it had come out, people who read it loved it, and now it was starting to spread to the people who didn't have the no internet, no comic book shop, that kind of stuff. And in the midst of all this like X-Men angst, mutant angst, and all this dark and grim and gritty stuff going on, he comes out with a sitcom like of superheroes. And he fought to get this book. He was doing Legion. People were like bragging about his Legion stuff. And then he would go by the editor. I can't remember if it was Heffler or Carlin. I don't remember who was editing this at the time, right? But what he was doing is that he was taking slips of paper and he was sliding them under their office doors saying, I want the Justice League. I want the Justice League. He knew what was coming. And so to me, those punk roots is always about going kind of against the grain, looking around a little bit, being, I'm very cantankerous. If something is popular, I'm already looking 6 months down the line of what can be new months. And
I think the Justice League International was fated to be a hit, not only because of the environment, because it ended up fulfilling a niche that was a popular niche, and the other thing is before Crisis, Justice League before Legends, Justice League had been aimless. The whole Justice League Detroit thing. I know people like some of the characters, but
I'm containing myself. I hear Justice League Detroit, and I'm just like ready to.
No, but I see that people like some of the characters, but that's not how you should publish a Justice League comic. That's like that was Avengers West. That was a bit like the West Coast Avengers if they weren't funny.
I got to go back the other way. Yeah.
And that's what Giffen made them. Giffen knew that at that stage because we had the Superman movies and we were about to get the Batman movies.
Yeah,
you were not going to get classic Justice League, the real members in the comic.
Yeah,
and he ended up with a good alternative that allowed him to tell stories. The Batman is in the first arc is there to sell the book to the normies.
Yeah.
The rest is all the other characters.
Well, for
Oberon.
Yeah, for what they wanted to do, you had to have some C, B, C list characters so you could do things to them. You can't do anything to Batman in this book that'll affect you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we got some Blue Beetles. My thing is that like I didn't know this book was a hit. When I'm getting it off the stands, I was just getting it because I loved it. Issue 4, I threw across the room, and it's my brother revealed to me a couple years ago. It's the only time I ever scared him when we were growing up when I threw a comic book. And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because they're putting that fucking Booster Gold in my damn Justice League." All right, I'm on my bed reading comics. He's in the beanbag in my room reading his comics, and then all of a sudden it just goes flying by his face. You know what I mean? So when this came up, I could be like kind of critical of it and stuff, but this is definitely of its era. I've got everything that they did. I told you I had the conversation with Keith Giffen, and I'm going to plug. The reason I didn't bring a bunch of the books out is I had a bunch of books, and I've got 2 videos, one on the Justice League Detroit from like 10 years ago, And I got a whole video of Justice League, the Giffen Demantes era. I've already made the video. It's there. But this stuff came out and it was gold. I absolutely loved it. Now, my critique though is that there was 5 solid years. It was petering out towards the end there. It just got too into itself. And we had 2 or 3 story arcs where there were real stakes that Giffen reminded us that, he can write some superhero stories where somebody's going to die and things like that. They put in Taxi Driver by having, him take, Guy Gardner took Ice to on a date, and it was to an adult theater. They had a sort of an exorcism thing, got a little serious here and there. But those 5 years is perfect. Justice League America, Justice League Europe, Justice League Antarctica, annuals, and anything that came out. It's a good 5 years. When they revisited it with those books you're talking about, formerly known as Justice League and all that stuff like that, to me, it was too much. All of a sudden, I was just sort of like, oh, man, this came out exactly when it should have. I'm not saying it's dated, but I'm like, it's something you can't get the lightning back in the bottle, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's not.
Sure.
Out,
I get it. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned 5 years, because that thing comes out right when Legends ends. And what happens 5 years later? Superman dies.
There we go. It gets
Justice League. They were an important part of the Death of Superman storyline. And after that, okay, they're done.
And again, I'll always take a shot at Booster Gold if somebody brings it up. But when they left, Dan Jurgens came on, started doing the Justice League. And when Doomsday crossed over, because Dan Jurgens was on the Superman book, I was like, oh, please do it. Here's Dan Jurgens with his Booster Gold in the Justice League. I hate it. I absolutely still hate the blue and gold team. I can read them and enjoy like the Kui Island stuff and everything. But I feel like they ruined Ted Cord. I've accepted it. You know what I mean? That's my one big problem, if I had a problem with it. But all of a sudden, I'm sitting here thinking, here comes, Doomsday, and he gets a hold of Booster Gold, and it's Dan Jurgens writing, and I'm like, is this it? Do we finally get him killed? And he beats the hell out of him. He still lives, and they give him worse armor than before. They give him armor instead of his suit. Because
but we're in 1992. That armor was normal at the time.
I know. Captain America had his own version of armor.
By the time Justice League International got tired, it was not because of Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. It was Maxima and Bloodwind.
Nice. Yeah.
And I never understood Bloodwind's appeal. And when they finally reviewed, okay.
I hated Bloodwind. I hated that design, and then I couldn't believe they gave the electric suit. That was the same design. This is when I was finally getting back. I could get to comic book shops, and I was getting into Vertigo and some indies finally, and refining my taste. Let me see. Gerber and the Guardians. Here we go. See what this says. People forget Gibson's Justice League was controversial. The modern comic sucks crowd in 87 were all hating the comedy in JLA. I saw some, it's in the letter columns. They would print some of them in letters columns and stuff, right? Like I said, I loved it, but when it was over with, I was ready for us to jump what Grant Morrison gave us. By the time that was over, it was a huge success. Yes, and controversial and stuff, but I think that controversy was one of the things that made it, work. Sequential Geek is here.
Yeah.
We got the Breen. The puppets are doing Justice League International number 16 in honor of Keith tonight. Oh, what channel is
that? It's in the Geeky Puppet Show. And I told Eric that now that I'm out of a job, I have time to stay up at 2 a.m. What time is it? I'll see if I can jump on.
If I remember, I want to see if I'm remembering right. Issue 16 is the cover with Bruce Wayne, where he is Bruce Wayne. It's a James Bond take. He's got fire and ice and evening gowns. They're Bond girls, and they're going undercover in Belilia. And he's going as Bruce Wayne because he's a billionaire. And it's a little undercover spy-like story and stuff where things go wrong. It's not the issue. I'm really surprised they picked that issue. So I'm definitely going to check it out and see out of all the ones they did. That's why I figured they would do Justice League number 5, where it's Batman doing the one punch on him and Black Canary.
that they hate to be obvious.
Yeah, they did a cliffhanger where Guy Gardner and Batman were going to finally go at it, and jokingly, a bunch of us, my brother, a guy named Robbie, we were kind of talking about it, and one of us somewhere in the crowd jokingly said it's going to be one punch, ha ha ha, and then we talked about other things. Ended up being one punch, but what made it funny is that Black Canary was in the background crying because, like, she was like, I missed it, and you got Blue Beetle with his hand up under his goggle because he's crying, he's laughing so hard, trying to wipe tears in his goggles and stuff. Yeah. Jimmy Fireball, what's up? I got here late. We'll have to watch from the beginning. I first got into Giffen on Defenders, loved his Legion and Justice League. Nice. Looking back, it's amazing that his Justice League was not grim and gritty. He went one way, the industry went another. That's what I was mentioning. And here we go. That show tonight, 8:15. Short on readers. I don't know if I'm going to be home.
Yeah, it's 1:15 a.m. for me, so I think I can be there.
Okay.
I say things like this. You're up at 1:15 a.m. Yeah. Why?
Nice. All right. Now here's what's kind of cool. Giffen was so good that he'd pop in. There's little known books. I mean, you got to look up his bibliography because he was everywhere in things you wouldn't know, right? So he did this fantastic story with Peter David and Giffen, and it's Keith Giffen. And they did this story where we have this character that was in Justice League. He's Galactus, but he's into fashion instead of eating planets. And he's got the Scarlet Skier. And it's fantastic because they tell this story of, like, in 1910 in Ohio, there's only 2 cars. They had dirt roads, no stop signs and stuff, right? And the mathematical equation to show how these 2 cars could have met are astronomical. Meanwhile, Starman is just flying through space. You know what I mean? And he's like, but in 1910, those 2 cars were on the same crossroads out in the middle of nowhere, and going 10 miles per hour, they crashed. They ran into each other. Right? So here's Starman out in space. Peter David and Giffen are telling this story, right? He's just flying along. And as they're telling the story, you see the Scarlet Skier. You see the Starman just flying through big empty space. And they actually hit each other. So this book was kind of dwindling stuff. Roger Stern did this book and stuff like that. And they brought in Lobo, put him in space and all this stuff. And Giffen and Peter David came in and did what I think is one of the most underrated comics ever, when you just want to read a comic and be entertained. You know what I mean? It means nothing. There's no worldwide universal danger or anything like that. But you read this and you're going to chuckle. It's really good. So one thing I want to make sure we throw in here, because your eyes lit up when I showed this before the show started. But, like, we're showing all the humor stuff, and I keep trying to tell people, or not trying to tell people, but remind people that Giffen could write some serious books. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's stakes, and he can write some evil stuff, some cruel stuff, but he could write the hell out of some cosmic stuff, right? So during Amalgamation, I can't remember if this was second wave or first wave, but we have John Romita Jr. coming in. And this is the second time I saw John Romita Jr. do some cosmic storytelling with his art, which he's fantastic at. But Keith Giffen came in and he did New Gods, Jack Kirby's Fourth World meets Jack Kirby's Gods in Marvel. And this is one of the most underrated comics, I think, ever, through Ryan and the new Asgods, excuse me, right? This thing is fantastic, to where I could not believe Keith Giffen wrote this. He has a moment where he has reached down and he is Isaac Asimov for a minute or something. Like, I can't, maybe a little bit of George Lucas in there. I don't know, man, but I had to look at the beginning of it and was like, yeah, this is Keith Giffen. He writes one of the greatest cosmic stories, just meshing all that stuff. I mean, I still can't believe this isn't, like, on people's top 10 comics of all time list sometimes, personal favorites.
Amalgam gets forgotten, it is. I'm pretty, especially because I'm pretty sure that there are idiots in comic shops who put that thing on T instead of putting it on A with amalgam, so that people can find all the amalgams.
Yeah. They still put them alphabetical. I've seen that before instead of categories. But I mean, I absolutely love what he did in this, The last time I really saw him do some cosmic stuff, it wasn't so much cosmic, but there's an Avengers annual he did where they visit the realm of the dead, and they're on a rock floating in space. And then he had a little bit of Silver Surfer pop up on his Daredevil run with Anacita, but yeah, I mean, he just says this thing is they just had a lot of fun with this one, man. Keith Giffen and a John Romita Jr. production. I mean, this is one of the things where even if you're not a John Romita fan, you might give a little nod to some of these panels,
Mhm.
But it
No,
was
Romita got the post Heroes Reborn Thor job because of that.
yeah. There's something about this era of the books where I smell some of the paper, the mid '90s, late '90s, and sometimes it's like it smells like a little bit like a cigarette, and there's like this was in a no smoking environment. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting here reading this. But anyway, yeah, the last page are some cosmic beings on a great cliffhanger. So yeah, by this time you just had two guys who had been in comics for quite a while, and they just knew their craft really well. I really enjoyed that one, Giffen. This is one of those little Giffen Easter egg gems out there, I think. So, but the two biggest characters that I think that, and I think they were maybe created a year apart in the early '80s. One was like huge almost from the get go, and then it kind of died down. And then one that he made later, a year later after the first one, it's still big. Like, and he doesn't understand it because it came up. But it's Ambush Bug and Lobo. Do you know anything about Ambush Bug and Lobo?
Yeah, Lobo. People knew the people. Foreign publishers liked to push Lobo because he looked cool.
Yeah.
Ambush Bug is not something that I see even in other countries when I'm looking for info. It doesn't have anything to do with the superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny and may have a humor that's difficult to translate. So
Yeah.
I imagine that it would not be very popular outside North America, when even in North America is not a crowd favorite.
Is Deadpool popular over there?
Yes, but
Okay.
Deadpool's easy. But Deadpool's fart humor.
Yep. Okay. Deadpool broke the fourth wall. Ambush Bug is a character that when it came out, I'm like, how did this happen? I mean, I had to really, even as a kid, I had to kind of transition from they're doing something funny here and letting this character come out and make Superman even look like an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't understand it at first, right? That it was satire and all this stuff. Is this supposed to be in some kind of continuity or whatever, right? But when he came out, he was quite a killer. Like Superman, Doom Patrol, Comics Presents, first appearance of Ambush Bug, quite different. And Keith Giffen pitched him as Bugs Bunny in the DC universe. That's what he's supposed to be, right? And he was popping up like everywhere. Got miniseries. I mean, he was quite popular. It was satire. He broke the fourth wall. He ran his mouth. He had a doll that was a sidekick named Cheeks and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, you were just like his arch villain. He didn't know it was an arch villain, but it was a Argyle sock that had come to life and had a Doctor Doom mask. I mean, you just go on and everything like that. Got his own miniseries. And one of the things that I would tell people to put in their collection, because it's a great comic, is DC Comics Presents number 59. It's the Legion of Superheroes and Keith Giffen, but it's Ambush Bug. He gets caught in Superman's cape as he's flying to the future. And it takes him a minute to realize he's in the future. So I mean, this is like one of Keith Giffen's, moments, all this stuff. So anyway, Ambush Bug could teleport and do all this stuff. And when Deadpool really started becoming Deadpool, was it Casey and McGinnis? It was when he got an ongoing series, not the miniseries.
Joe Kelly.
Joe Kelly, yeah. I read some of it, and when he was breaking the fourth wall and stuff, I'm like, this is Ambush Bug. The way he's running his mouth and everything.
Here's the thing. I always preferred Liefeld's take on Deadpool because I understood that readers were not supposed to find Deadpool funny. Only Deadpool thought he was funny. Nobody else did.
Yes. But I say Liefeld's made a ton of money off of him,
Yeah.
But by the time Son of Ambush Bug came out, it was sort of dying down, and that probably had to do something with the controversy we were talking about. But this
Mhm.
first series, these are out of order and stuff, man. These are my beat up copies. Like I need to replace them, but I'll never get rid of them because they're hilarious. And as I got older, I was able
Was
to
that a
understand
koala? Was that a giant koala?
giant koala. That's right. Yes. Yeah, and then like he would take breaks in them, and Joni DC. I mean, this was just fantastic satire. But yeah, this is a dude that wanted to look cuter, so he came up with a experiment to make himself cuter. So he used koala DNA, and it slowly started turning him into a koala,
Hmm.
something like that.
That makes sense. Why not? It's better than sticking a than gluing a belt to your head.
Well, as he's going through New York destroying it, everybody's like, "Oh, so cute."
Yeah, that's a take on Ghostbusters. The
Yeah.
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Mhm.
Let me just get the cable. I need to recharge this thing.
And like I said, I have five. Oh yeah, go ahead. So while he's there, I have 5 issues of this Legion of Superheroes one shot that came up. I always try to give it a
Hmm.
home, and I could not find a one for this. So I'm glad there's an advertisement. You know. Oh man. And at the end of the series, they kept teasing you that Darkseid would appear the next issue, and then the next issue would get the same cliffhanger. You know. So it was fun stuff, right? And then they had a bunch of specials come out. This is the '90s one where all of a sudden Ambush Bug came out of nowhere, and he's
Hmm.
trying. I can't remember. He's trying to get back on his feet because he's an out of work comic book character. So
Hmm.
they look at what they satire everything that's going on in the '90s, and he
Yeah.
actually meets Sandman and Death, and I was just sort of like, I don't know how I feel about this. Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Death. He meets them in here.
Oh,
You
it had been 5 years since the previous miniseries, right? So
know?
that was the time when they put out one shots of certain characters just so they could keep the trademark.
There we go. Well, that's kind of why I thought this came out in 2008. Out of nowhere, we got Ambush Bug, Saturn Comics, and it's due to like all the revamps and the year ones and all this stuff, right? And they actually skipped an issue with the numbering on purpose. Like I think there was an
Mm.
issue they weren't going to let him publish, or so that was the story. So instead of like redoing the numbering, he just skipped it, moved on, and they never came out with that number. Uh, see, here's 4 and 5, like all this monitor stuff and everything going on. All the year one books that came out. Here's number 7. Yeah. Number 3, number 2, and number 1. So somewhere in there they've skipped number 6 or something. Yeah, but he's with the bunny. He wakes up with the bunny from Dumb Bunny from the Inferior 6. Oh my god, I'm going blank.
Inferior 5.
Thank you, Inferior 5. I've got Fatal 5. We talked about a lot of stuff this morning.
Yeah, there's a Fatal 5 and a Fearsome 5 and the Inferior 5.
But anyway, this is the one I would recommend people to get. I mean, it's cheap, and if you don't think it's funny, then sorry. Like I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, the thing about the Legion of Substitute Heroes, I don't understand the problem with their powers. I understand. I can. Chlorophyll Kid has a very practical power. He should have been a member. Polar Boy, as soon as he learned how to control his powers, yeah, because they didn't have a weather manipulator in the Legion, so he wouldn't be duplicating anybody. Even Night Girl, she could have worked as part of the Chameleon Boys covert operations team.
Well, let me tell you something. I would have no problem grabbing you, Gore Vidal, or something like that, and doing a whole show talking about Legion stuff. But see, the trick is if you go back to the Silver Age stuff, I caught onto it. There was a theme with them. They were misfits. So the
Mhm.
humor comes from like that 60s kind of misfits
Mhm.
thing. You know what I mean? They were a bit more classist, I guess. You know what I mean? But if you look at them, they're all environmental characters.
Mhm.
Stone Boy, Chlorophyll Kid, Fire Lad, Polar Boy, they're all elements. And then you have Night Girl out of the blue, which I still, sun, dark, light ray, who knows, and all that stuff, right? And their powers were never really supposed to be able to be controlled. And Polar Boy stuck out to me because I'm like, well, you just need to practice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's eventually what I think happened and stuff.
I mean, especially because we've had the X-Men by that point. The Iceman goes from being a snowman on the first issue. By the fourth one, he was in his regular ice form,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it wouldn't
Yeah.
have been a problem.
But what I liked is later on, Keith Giffen went straight on jokes. They were jokes and stuff with their one shots, and they were fun, and I loved the books. But later on, I loved what they did because in the 5 years later, I might have had that in here somewhere. When they did 5 years later, 1989, you get around issue 29 or 30, and you find out that the subs have become like this great militant sort of on the spur group, very organized and stuff. They became capable, and they're just called the subs. You go to the 2000s when Jeff Johns started his Legion trilogy and Action Comics and JSA GLA crossover with Brad Meltzer leading up to Legion of Three Worlds. He brought back the subs, and it was so cool because they turned it into like this rock and roll / punk little group who have no money, and they have to do it on the spur of the moment, almost sort of like a misfit A-team. To bust in and one of their missions to bust into this schoolroom, this building and stuff like that, they hijack a little space bus and they bust through the window while they're on it, and they just jump out, and you're just like, you can tell they're making this up as they go along. I like that idea of them being like, we're going to accentuate the positives. They're like ECW wrestling. There you go. You know what I mean? Yeah, there you go. No budget, but we're going to, we're going to shoot it fast and loose, And then the Lobo stuff. I got the first appearance of Lobo where he did this stuff, but I don't know if I showed the Amherstburg stocking stuffer. I mean, that's got too much stuff out here, man. But like, this is a staple of should be in everybody's stuff. And this is Simon Bosley, Keith Giffen, the Lobo Paramilitary Special. The Easter Bunny hires Lobo to take out Chris Crusher Kringle in his elves. Yeah. Not for children. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah, not for children. This was fantastic. As you can see, I grabbed them. These Lobo miniseries by Simon Bosley. That was the second one. But this one, when it hit the newsstand in 1990 for $1 and I got it home, Simon Bosley, I was like, heavy metal has returned. Keith Giffen made Lobo as satire and stuck him in the Omega Men because the anti-heroes were rising, the Punisher, Wolverine and stuff, and he thought that was ridiculous. So he made Lobo to try to show people how ridiculous those characters are in comics. They should be, comics should be something else. So he was so confused when he became popular.
But with British writers, it was bound to. But the British writers understood the idea that it was a satire because a few of them didn't even like superheroes. It's more of it's a satire on multiple levels because you have the biker look with the hair metal band in the hair metal band because hair metal was no longer popular in 1990.
Yeah.
So it looked like an old rock and roll star who refuses to update.
Well, I'm glad you're saying this, man, because like my idea of his look, the reason it stuck around was I found my words, but it was like Snake Plissken. Snake Plissken is never going to change his look. I just somehow knew that. So when they had that awful sequel, Escape from LA, they even commented on his look being retro. So, I mean, when it comes to Snake Plissken and Lobo, don't ask me why, but those characters merge in my head. You know what I mean? Yeah. And this is one that got in trouble for because Simon Bosley said he doesn't understand why people got mad. He hit a penis in the elbow, and he said that's how the muscles are really shaped. You have to look it up. It's Lobo's back #1. It may not show up.
I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, maybe it's that one. Oh, there it is. It's #2. There's a uncircumcised penis as an elbow in there.
Oh, that right. Yeah, #2. Okay.
Ridiculous. Sam Keith art. But yeah, the Lobo stuff took off, and it blew my mind because it was one of the first DC characters a DC character, not Marvel character, where they had their fans, even if they were just casual readers. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not sure the muscle actually looks like that, but
it's probably #1. Lobo's back #1 is the one that got people. I mean, it was controversial at the time that we actually heard. One of the comic shop I was at actually cut a board in half, a comic book board, and they would put it up against it on the shelf.
Right. That is how the muscle looks like. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think this might have been the last issue, but he did. I thought I had number one out. Like I said, I'm running out of steam here. I probably got about 10 more minutes here, Paulo. But this one right here, this is a great issue where they did a Legion of 5 years. They finally went grim and gritty. You know what I mean? Like he had 5 years of Justice League, started in '87, where it was all nice and stuff. And then all of a sudden they jumped the Baxter series, the Legion of Superheroes, 5 years in 1989 or 90. So he was still on Justice League. And it was all grim and gritty. You know what I mean? Like they finally turned it into a grim and gritty book. I love the books. You know what I mean? But around issue 38, Earth blows up, guys, and all the cities and stuff are encapsulated, and they go off into space. And New Earth is a bunch of cities connected out in space, looking like a little hive floating out there. But I couldn't believe he did this. Giffen was able to put Neil Gaiman's death in there during the death of Earth. So every now and then, Giffen would kind of surprise you. You know what I mean? With a little bit of substance to something. The funny guy had a little bit of depth here and there, you know. Because I really can't think of anything too much where it wasn't just pure entertainment, if you will. You know what I mean? With some high stakes every now and then. He'd take you on a roller coaster ride, or he'd have you in stitches or whatever. But every now and then he would like get deep, and where he didn't do that very often, that's some of the books that stand out in my head with this stuff, because there's not a lot. Here's that. Yeah. 5 years later, number one. If it shows up, it's so dark. Yeah. Oh, and real quick. And the guy, you know, in the midst of him saying they had he lost his reputation and stuff, he got the lead two of these summer crossovers when they started to become a thing. You know, he did the invasion stuff where he took the Dominators that were in Legion of Superheroes, turned it into Mars Attacks, and had them in Australia. All the heroes. It had McFarlane on this right when he was hitting big, and I think Bart Sears and stuff. There we go. Yeah, these are 80-page giants. And then he turned around and had the annual event of the summer in 91 or 92 where it was Eclipso, you know, coming out. You had an actual jewel on there. You know, we did this with Bart Sears. I thought I had an issue of the series. Yeah. And then he turned around, and out of this, we got a great Eclipso series that it didn't last long, but as long as Giffen and Bart's, you know, the first 3 or 4 issues are actually really good. Like I said, Giffen, like you said, Giffen was very versatile and stuff, right? He could write some serious stuff. And a one shot that I like, they brought in Kurt Swan, and Giffen did this one shot on Aquaman, and Kurt Swan did some great art. I keep this for the artwork. It was so cool to let Giffen be able to be Giffen after being on Superman for so long. I knew he could do other stuff. And this didn't click with me. He did his take on Aquaman. It's a mini series where they're kind of doing the retelling of Aquaman. His orange and green outfit was, you know, everybody said it was silly. Well, it turns out it's a prison uniform. So the king of Atlantis kept it to remind people he was once a prisoner. They didn't go deep enough with it, and they're fighting aliens that are Mars attack aliens as jellyfish taking over Atlantis. You know, so they all weren't winners, folks.
Yeah, that was published as a special over here. It was, you know, that mini series where he has the blue uniform.
Yeah,
which nobody liked, but I liked that look.
Oh, it's still one of my favorite looks. I still like it. I mean, I keep all the Aquaman stuff obviously together and stuff, and I almost wanted to bring it up to ask you if you'd seen it before. I love that series. I love the artwork in it. Yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, I imagine that thing's a bitch to draw if you were the one who came up with it.
I don't know. You know, I mean, that is, well, talking about costumes, the bitch to draw that I've heard about is Jack of Hearts, and Keith Giffen designed that costume. And I've actually heard people at conventions, pros somewhere along the line, sprinkled here and there, like playfully, like screw Giffen for that costume. You know what I mean? Like apparently that is the costume that's impossible to draw that Giffen came up with. All right, that's all I got, man. You got anything else you want to bring up or talk about or anything?
No. Yeah, the I guess we didn't delve too much into the Annihilation stuff because while Giffen was involved in the beginning, he did a couple of the mini series and reintroduced Star-Lord. And Star-Lord in the mini series where Star-Lord first starts recruiting the skeleton of what became the Guardians, he is acting a bit like early JLI Maxwell Lord. I can't believe I'm working with these guys.
Yeah.
Uh, but it didn't stay on much longer because the rest of the cosmic universe is pretty much Dan Abnett. But yeah, Giffen's contributions made the Marvel universe interesting for a few years. All that cosmic section, and he made one of the ideas that was bound to make old fans complain that they're bringing Star Lord into the main universe.
Yeah.
He made it work. So yeah, I think Giffen was an important part of that, and I'm thankfully worked on that.
Well, if I'm comparing it to music, look with 2020 vision, looking back at Giffen, sitting here doing this and talking about it and stuff. There's a guy named Brian Seltzer that's with who started out in the Stray Cats. You know who I'm talking about there? The
No.
Stray Cat. Well, they're a three-piece band that came out in the 80s, and they kind of brought rockabilly back, not 50s doo-wop and Grease and all that stuff. They did rockabilly. Well, and there was like, it kind of exploded there in the early 80s a little bit, right? And then the swing music of the 90s, that was because of Brian Seltzer bringing back another form of music, and the dude exploded again. You know what I mean? That's kind of like Giffen in comics. It seems like he was able to give certain things a shot in the arm and create a little bit of excitement, give some things some life. And what I really like is, you remember DC 52, that weekly book that came out where you had Grant Morrison, Jeff Johns,
Yep.
Rory Baker, somebody else. Well, Dan Didio all those guys met in a hotel room to start plotting the book because it was going to be a weekly thing and figure out how to make this work. Well, Giffen was the muscle. Okay. He would be sitting in a corner and Didio would be like, you see Giffen over there? And Giffen would be like, yeah. And they were like, yeah, we see him. He's like, well, if you guys screw this up, he's taking over. And he'll be writing the book for that week until you get your act together. So Giffen was the threat. So Giffen ended up doing the loose pencils, the layouts for all of 52, but he was there in case these guys couldn't get their act together to do a weekly book, and he was going to take over. So you're sitting there with Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, Ed Brubaker, these great writers, and it's Giffen. They're saying that's how much of esteem that Didio had for Giffen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can't get this act together, we're just going to hand it to him, And Giffen's just sitting in the corner. And if you've seen Giffen, man, he's like my size and super skinny, so in a Hawaiian shirt. So that's funny to consider him like the muscle, acting all tough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he knew what he was doing. He made the comic work in terms of storytelling, because even though you could see the different styles on top of his layouts, and they wouldn't have been able to publish that thing weekly if they hadn't been having somebody doing the rough layouts for everybody else to do the details over.
Yeah, and another thing with Giffen is as long as a career he's had, and he seems like he was realistic about a lot of things. Like he says, yeah, I screwed up every way you could screw up. I screwed up. You know what I mean? But even what he's done, Alan Moore has apologized for taking innocence out of comics or messing something up. Giffen, I don't think has really ever had a huge misstep to where he really screwed something up. Even the stuff that I could critique or don't like, it's not that bad. You know what I mean? The one thing that, like, as much as like you see, I like his stuff and everything like that, bringing Booster Gold into the Justice League, I can never forgive that because he never went away. He never went away, and he ruined Ted Cord. There you go. That's what I think the worst thing Keith Giffen did. They ruined Ted Cord. And brought in Booster Gold. It's not a bad track record for somebody that was almost in comics for closer to 50 years than 45. I don't know how long he was there, but yeah, that's a pretty good track record. It's a big one in my eyes, but pretty good. And Lobo Mania. Lobo's had fans for years. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but the thing we were told that at the time was that they kept the Lobo monthly comic being published only because it sold very, very well in Germany.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah. I can see that German thing, but I'm thinking like music. They've always had the leather and the black over there, and I can see that. Yeah. But I also heard that the Scorpions, who came from Germany, were never big over there. I don't know if that's true either. Yeah. So, who knows? That's it. Well, Paulo, I'm going to I'm gonna close it down here, man. But don't like run off. But you got anything else you want to bring up or anything? I'm gonna have to leave here in about 15 minutes. And
No, not much. I have the Amadora Festival starting. It starts next week. We have a. I'll try to. I need to go there and I'll try to take pictures of the exhibits
yeah,
because we have a 85th anniversary of Superman exhibit. We have a Layla Starr exhibit. We have a Great Gatsby exhibit because Layla Starr and Great Gatsby have Portuguese artists.
nice. Oh, they have Ollie's. Talking about Great Gatsby, Ollie's, the outlet store, has a Great Gatsby comic book series collected in a trade that's selling for $3. Oh man! All right. Well, thanks everybody for popping in here. Good to see everybody. Check out that puppet show tonight. Breen's channel, Paulo. Check them all out. Paulo, maybe somewhere down the line we can get back on here. Maybe do some Legion talk or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah,
Anything you want to bring up? Yeah.
yeah. I'll since for the next 2 weeks, I'm not sure if I'm going there on the Saturdays or the Sundays, but I also know that I have a couple of family events, so we'll try to do something in November maybe.
Well, I think behind the scenes and with everybody, they my schedule is just whenever I can do this. I try to,
Mhm.
So yeah. Well, like I said, I would just like to get it planned down the line. That'd be awesome, man. So, all right, later, everybody.
Awesome. See ya.